I'm Travis Montague, founder and CEO of Holler. This is Conversation Nation. I'm joined with Kelly Wulff, General Counsel at Vouch Insurance. Kelly, welcome. Glad to have you today.
Thanks, great to be here.
But before we jump in, why don't you just give a quick background on you and Vouch Insurance?
I am the General Counsel of Vouch Insurance. I'm actually celebrating my 2-year anniversary at Vouch today. So I joined the team back in December of 2018 to help them build business insurance products for other startups. Prior to joining Vouch, I was leading the legal team at another startup called Zenefits. And before that, I was in-house at Adobe on the corporate team. So doing lots of stuff across a much larger organization.
When we spoke before, you said that you've worked with a lot of founders who potentially are looking to bring counsel on for the first time. What are some of the things that you think are important for founders to think about as they're doing that?
One of the things I like to remind them of is that, they're the people that know their business the best. So when they're thinking about the team that they want to bring around the table, they should really trust their instincts on what type of resources they need and when they need them. And don't be afraid to ask for advice from others, because there's a lot of really great conversations out there happening about, how to build a good, healthy business.
So when you engage with young tech startups, what is your kind of advice to them around ethics?
I think it's never too early to start thinking about it. Whether you're a startup and you're just about to launch your first product in market, or you're a public company, in many regards, you're held to the same standard. And really one of the big strategic advantages that a startup has is that they can actually change and adapt fairly quickly. So if you're a really large company, if you're going to make a strategic decision to, for example, stop using cookies, that is a huge decision that will take years to execute on. If you're a startup and you're building your infrastructure and you have a couple engineers that you can throw at the problem, you might be able to get that done in a month or two. As importantly, every company at some point will run into that first experience when you realize oops, we're not doing this the way we thought we were doing it. And that's actually the moment when that decision that you made 3, 6, 12 months ago about how you wanted to handle customer data, that is the rubber that meets the road. Values don't become real until you have to live them. So, you can write down a specific position, or you can write down what your company values are, and those are great. But you really don't test your values in the easy moments, you test your values in the hard moments.
I took a mental note: values aren't real until you have to live them, right? We could say anything that we want, but until a scenario where a client wants you to operate it on the other end of the line, your values need to show at that moment. I'll switch gears with you a little bit. So what are some of your thoughts with respect to the future of how consumer data will be treated in the next wave of, of the internet?
I think what we're seeing now is really a rebirth of transparency, right? It's really going back to the kind of core principles of making sure users understand what data is being collected about them and how that data is being used. And as a result of that transparency, you're starting to see new regulations come out, giving users control over that information, whether it's an opt-out or they can ask for their information to be deleted. I guess I'm almost a little bit surprised that it's controversial that people should have a right to know how their data is being used, or how their data is being collected, or why it's being collected, or even what is being collected. It just seems like that shouldn't be controversial. And it might be hard for businesses to answer that question, but just because it's hard doesn't mean it's not the right thing to do.
If you feel strange about asking the consumer for their information in certain ways, then maybe we shouldn't be engaging in that behavior at all. We need to get back to a world where we build technology and we use information at the service of consumers, and not just for the purpose of surveillance and being able to exploit that information later on in some other context, which they didn't intend.
It's getting completely sent to a third party, or even being used by the company for something completely unrelated to what the person originally signed up for, like that might cross the creepy factor. And you don't need to be a lawyer to know that, like, if if you're creeping your users out, you're probably not doing the right thing.
You know, as we kind of come to the end of this, you know, you've worked at Adobe, you've worked at Zenefits. Is there any key things that you've learned in those experiences that you think will be helpful jewels to the audience?
I really should attribute this quote. So one of the privacy officers that I've had the pleasure of working with, Mimi Rasmussen, she was a privacy officer at Adobe. And she used to say what you do and do what you say. You know, I think that's a really important thing for, again, all companies of any size. If you can answer those two questions for yourself, if you can say that, yes, we're saying what we're doing and we're doing what we're saying, like, you are miles ahead of most other businesses. Doing the right thing is hard, but it's the right thing to do. And, you know, whether you're facing a tough decision from when you're building out your strategy, or if you're thinking about like how to appropriately shape your organization, or maybe you do have that first lawsuit or you have that first regulatory inquiry, like, doing the right thing is hard, but it is the right thing to do. And if you start to train and build that muscle, it actually gets easier over time and you'll end up with better outcomes.
The things that you're saying are music to my ears, and I'm certain that a lot of our viewers are going to take a lot of learning from this and apply it to their own businesses. So thank you for taking the time and sharing your wisdom with us.
It's been great. I really enjoyed the conversation.